Hello everyone, my name is Kidley, and today I'd like to talk to you a little about the two new planets that were announced that will be in the expansion Knights of the Eternal Throne. The new planets are going to be Iocath and Nethema. Now, Iocath is actually going to be a completely artificial world, just straight metal and that sort of thing. It kind of reminds me of an early comment that was made back about 6 years ago when they were first making this game. They were making like Coruscant as an example, or Nar Shaddaa, planets that have no actual like real organic, ground and that sort of thing. And they actually had to make those planets basically out of metal is what we are seeing in game. And at that time they said, doing a planet like that was really, really difficult because you actually have to craft the floor plating and the walls and the ceilings and sort of all of that by hand and put them in sort of a section at a time, when apparently doing a real world with, grass and terrain and stuff is a little bit easier for them apparently. So it's actually neat that they're sort of going back to that, and we're going to get to see something like that again. Now, of course, the two new planets are going to be completely story-driven, so they're not going to be that big open world that we've seen with sort of Coruscant and Nar Shaddaa. But it should be pretty cool nonetheless, because I think they are trying to do some different things with Iocath, so that should be pretty interesting. But I think the more interesting planet is actually going to be Nethema. That is a world that is going to be returning. It's already in the lore. If you've read the Book of Revan, almost like the Bible or something, the Book of Revan, you'll know that Nethema's in that. It's the home world of the Emperor Valkorion, whichever name you want to use. We know that Valkorion, or the Emperor, actually just took away all life on the planet, and that was, some time ago. I believe the exact quote was a little over 1,000 years ago. Everything was eradicated, and now since then, there's actually been a little bit of rebuilding that's been done, and there's actually some creatures that have come back, very dark and mangled and weird and that kind of stuff. So I think actually going to Nethema, at least for me, is going to be the most interesting part. Now, I've got a little something I want you to listen to. This is actually from the Revan book, and you have got Darth Nihilus taking Lord Scourge, who is the Jedi Knight companion, to Nethema for the first time. And I just want you to listen to this as they land and they describe what Nethema is really all about. And of course, I'm taking this from the audiobook, so full credit to those guys. I believe it was Mark Thompson who actually did the reading on that. And the Star Wars audiobooks are really, really good. So if you like what you're about to hear, I definitely go out and buy those, because all of the SWTOR books are really good. But that aside, let's go ahead and listen to this here real quick, and then I'm going to come back and sort of give you my final thoughts. So here we go.
The absence grew steadily more pronounced as the shuttle approached and then landed on Nethema.
Come with me.
Nihilus commanded, rising up from her seat. Still mute, Scourge followed her down the shuttle's boarding ramp and out onto the world itself. They had touched down at a spaceport in a city, or what used to be a city. The spaceport was surrounded by the buildings, speeder pads, and streets one would expect to see in a planet's major metropolitan center. But it was eerily quiet. The incessant murmur of the crowds and the constant hum of traffic whizzing past on busy streets were missing. There wasn't even any wind, and the air tasted stale in Scourge's mouth. The temperature was neither cold nor hot, but he felt himself starting to shiver.
You feel the chill of the void,
Nihilus told him.
The Force is energy. It gives heat to our emotions and our minds. But here, it has been stripped away.
She led him along the deserted streets as Scourge stared in fascinated horror, trying to grasp the magnitude of what he was witnessing. The buildings seemed to be almost fully intact. There was none of the damage and destruction normally associated with millions of simultaneous deaths. However, there were other signs of what had happened here. Mangled speeders and shuttles were strewn about, the remains of vehicles in motion that had crashed to a halt when their pilots were taken by the ritual. And everywhere Scourge looked, there were small piles of clothes, jackets, slacks, and boots that had survived what their owners had not. Normally, these remains would have been picked over by scavengers, but on Nathema, even the vermin and insects were extinct. "Where are the droids?" Scourge asked. He was shocked at the sound of his own voice. It was flat and dull, as if even sound waves had been distorted by the ritual.
The ritual overloaded their circuits,
Nyrus explained, her voice as hollow and washed out as his.
The damage was irreparable. Even their memory cores were completely wiped out.
Scourge glanced upward and noticed something else unusual. The sun shining down on them from above, a star that had appeared bright orange as they'd approached the planet, was now a pale shade of brown. In fact, everything around them was either brown or gray, as if the colors had been leached out. Scourge was well acquainted with death. He had no trouble understanding massacres and mass slaughter. Death and destruction unleashed powerful emotions like fear, suffering, and hatred. They fueled the power of the dark side. But what had happened on Nathema was different, and it disturbed him in a deep and profound way. The Emperor had consumed everything: life, sound, color, even the Force. Nothing remained. This wasn't about conquest or domination or destroying an enemy, all concepts Scourge embraced. Everything on Nathema had simply been snuffed out, extinguished so completely that it ceased to have any meaning or purpose. It was a vacuum of existence, a blight on the natural order. "I've seen enough," he declared. Nyrus nodded, and they turned and made their way back to the ship. Scourge finally understood why Nyrus and the others wanted to take the Emperor down. Destroying your enemies, even destroying a planet, was understandable. But this wasn't simple destruction. It was annihilation, obliteration. The very fabric of the Force had been shredded. Anyone capable of turning an entire planet into a nihilistic abomination had to be completely mad. After seeing the horrors of Nathema, he truly believed the Emperor might declare another war against the Republic, exposing them to the Jedi and leading to the eventual extinction of their species. By the time they reached the shuttle, Scourge's stomach was churning. He had lived his whole life attuned to the Force. Having it stripped away had left him physically ill. The shuttle shook as they took to the air, and he fought against the urge to vomit. As they broke the atmosphere of the cursed world, some semblance of normalcy returned. Scourge felt the Force rushing in to fill the emptiness inside him. He felt its power invigorating him and restoring his strength. At the same time, he also felt something else. The presence of someone strong in the Force. Someone who was neither Nyrus nor him. Nyrus suddenly began punching away at the shuttle's controls, scanning the system for another vessel, and Scourge knew she felt it too.
There,
she said, pointing at the readout.
The ship just dropped out of hyperspace in this system.
Could the Emperor have sent someone to follow us? Scourge asked.
I don't think so,
she replied, staring at the screens.
Its signature doesn't match any design I've ever seen before.
From her voice, it was clear she was as puzzled as he was. If the ship hadn't followed them here, the odds against it showing up at the same time they were here were astronomical. But Scourge understood the ways of the Force too well to believe in coincidence. There had to be some connection between them and the unexpected visitor.
Looks like a small freighter of some kind.
Nyrus muttered.
I don't think they've seen us.
Scourge realized they had two options. The first was to make a quick jump to hyperspace in an effort to escape before being noticed. Nyrus decided to take the second option. Reaching out a finger, she activated the shuttle's ion cannon, locked on to the unidentified vessel, and fired.
So there you go. That's sort of the description of Nathema, and I really hope that the developers actually stick to that as close as they possibly can. Now, one thing that's really interesting, as it was sort of described there, the Force users, almost get sick. They can't even hardly stand being there, and their powers and stuff are diminished. I think it'd be really cool if they actually put that in game. Now, there's been some other stuff in other stories where you've had wounded states or sickened states or like something similar to that, and your character's all, kind of hunched over. I think it'd be really cool for the Force users if they actually did that, and maybe your bonus to healing, bonus to damage is like reduced by 25% or 50% or, whatever it is whenever you're on a Nathema. I just, from a story and lore purpose, I think that would be really cool. But yeah, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Iocath and Nathema are going to be the two new worlds that are going to be coming in the expansion. So pretty cool stuff, But that will go ahead and do it for this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. Thank you all so much for watching. And with that being said, everybody keep playing, have fun, and I'll leave you with this little tidbit. As I ended that audio piece, they were talking about a super strong Force user approaching them in another ship. That was indeed Revan. Yes, it was.